Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I haven't done a video like that for a very long while. I've been getting a lot of requests in the comments of my previous videos to do a reason related video, so here I am making one for you. Today I'm going to be breaking down one of the fairly new track, but at the same time pretty old because I haven't done any new jungle in months right now, and that's the track. On a side note, I'd like to get back to the never-ending hardware versus software debate. I personally love everything what I do with hardware, and when it comes to jungle, I actually prefer when it's made with hardware, because at least in my case, whenever I make music with hardware, I pretty much like it everywhere, every time I make it, 100%. And when it comes to software, I usually never like my software tracks fully. I mean, 50–60% maybe, but they just never sound right to me. So whenever I have enough time, I always usually use hardware. In this case with this track, I mean, I recently been having very little time to make music, so I was skipping the whole hardware thing and just choosing the most convenient way, which is software. But I don't find it fun to work, nor it is very inspiring, so the results are not really... I don't like the results when I work with software, and eventually I'd say it's just a waste of my time. But it might be different for you, so everybody has different experience, but my take on that is this, that when it comes to jungle, nothing can beat hardware. Hardware acts differently, it just sounds differently, and it has a little bit of micro lag. So whenever you trigger, say, drum break notes, it always has a bit of a little bit more organic flow. It's not as strict and tight as with software. So yeah. Another thing, this track that I'm gonna be showing you today is more for the demonstration purpose. It's not something I would release because I'm not really happy with it. You might like it, and if you like it, leave a comment. But my case is that I don't really like it as much. So as I said, it's more for the demonstration purpose to show you my workflow. And since you were asking many different questions, how I program, how I do my breaks, how I chop my breaks, I'll try to explain everything in this video. And if I miss something and not touch on something, sorry. I'm not really like a teacher kind of guy. I don't know how to, do things, how to show things properly. I do understand what I do, but I not necessarily always know how to explain that to you. So let's start with samples and breaks that I'm using. First of all, I like to pre-process everything before going into the reason. So when I'm in reason, I don't have to worry too much about any live processing like bit reduction, compression, and stuff like that, other than maybe EQ. So, for example, a name and break. That's been already pre-processed, but to show you what I have in mind when I say pre-process is I'm usually using the RX 950 plugin before it goes to Reason. And when it comes to drums, I don't necessarily use extreme settings. Something like that is fine. The bandwidth. But when it comes to different sounds like atmospheric pads and whatever, I usually go very extreme on my bandwidth settings. So this sound's already processed. So for example, I have this sound which was already processed. But my settings were somewhere like that, like as low, the bandwidth as low as possible to give it really like crusts. And once I have my sample collection, the way I work for a track, I usually create a folder which contains sort of like a mini sample pack for the specific track that contains a couple of breaks, like an 808 bass, and a couple of other samples that I feel like I would like to use in the track. So I end up with maybe 8 to 9 sounds. So I keep it fairly small and limited. Same that I would do with hardware, because hardware only has, my Akai only has 8 outputs, 8 individual outputs, so it allows me to use up to 8 different sounds, and which is, I think, when you make like 90s jungle, underground jungle, it's more than enough, because it's not about, you know, huge production and too many sounds, but rather than the vibe and making going against the popular sort of commercial music production, whereas the commercial tracks have so much going on. Drum and bass, a lot of new trendy drum and bass, to me it's just pure commercial music. It's no longer, it doesn't have that, you know, underground spirit that was actually going against the vibe. Instead, everybody's producing with the computers these days, that you can do everything, the whole production, the say underground music. So this is my project. As you can see, it's pretty limited, not much going on, and that's how I always want it to be, because the less stuff you have, the quicker you can realize your ideas, the easier it is to mix down, and in general you're not getting tired of your track, because when you have so much going on, you have to listen through all of it a lot more times. And in my case, I sometimes just write the track from start to finish, and once it's finished, I only then hear it in full for the first time. So I like to work on my tracks on a sort of surprise level, where I don't think through what I do. It's not like I write a bar, like 8 bars and stuff, and I think of like, what could I change, I'd rather when I start my tracks, I intuitively already know what I'm gonna, like what sort of things I'm gonna put in, like notes and how I'm programming my drums and stuff, and I get carried away and I just continue writing until I reach a point of maybe 4 to 5 minutes, because I think this is like the sweet spot for me, for my tracks. And only then, once I have like finished everything, or all of the parts, only then I might just hear it for the first time. And often I feel like the track is done. So I normally take between 2 to 4 hours to make a track. It depends. When I work with hardware, it usually takes at least 20-30 minutes to set it up the way I need, the way I want, you know, the sample things, chopping breaks and creating programs on the hardware. It takes time. It's not like, you know, drag and drop on the software, but generally from the moment I start writing a track, usually somewhere between 2 to 4 hours, because I don't have much going on. So I usually write my tracks pretty quick, and this is how I like. I mean, to me, don't forget, is the most important part is enjoying what you do. It's not the end result, but rather the, you know, the journey in making a track. So if I enjoy the process, I would most probably enjoy the finished result. So the aim and break, I just want to first show you the chops that I'm usually using for my breaks. By the way, for time stretch, I'm using this free program called Akaiser. Even when I'm using Akai sampler, I usually time stretch in the software, because it's a lot faster and a lot more convenient and easier. And the sound is pretty much the same that you would get from the actual Akai, stretching a break inside an Akai. So for example, yeah, I'm opening a break. So I use time factor 200%, and I got this. You can change the cycle length to have different sort of flangey effects. So it's a cool trick to add a lot of variety to your aim and breaks. And I usually, when I'm having a track based on the aim and break, this is my main break that I sometimes can end up with somewhere between 7 and 15 different chops, different vibrations of time stretch and flange effects and stuff that can add, you know, variety and different textures and complexity, which is what I'm always on. So to show you my amen break programming, so that's what it is. I usually use as a starting point C3, and this is where my kick lands. And then I pitch that down to like C2, so I would have a bit of a range of pitch. This can be useful if you want some variety. And then I just have, you know, the rest of the breaks. And this is how it all looks like. Quick and easy. There's also a secondary break because I always like to use more than one break to separate in arrangement in sections. You can have like a main motive, then a bit of a different motive, then mix that all together. So my other breaks, they don't necessarily need to have that many chops because they're usually a lot simpler in editing. For example, I have this pride break, which I only have 4 chops of it. And when I program that break, that's how it sounds. So breaks are the main element of the track, and then other sounds I usually either made them myself through soft scenes, playing different variations of pads and chords and stuff, or I just scroll through YouTube. Like, you know, YouTube is a huge ocean of sounds that you can pick anything really. And I don't really care about the bad quality and stuff because I degrade it anyway further, and then I process through different elements, plugins and stuff to get even like more crusty, crispy samples. So I don't care about the quality as long as I get the textures and something I really like out of the sample. So I've just picked up some crazy samples. For example, well, 808, yeah. And just I've got the Roland GV10, 2 instances of Roland GV1080. One goes for literally just the, for the percussion, which you can hear already was heavily used in the 90s, especially by one of my favorite producers, Source Direct. I always use that right in my tracks because I think it adds a lot of great rhythmical texture, but it's not as, you know, it just keeps you keeps the, you know, rhythm. And then I've got pads. JB1080 is just such a lovely sounding synth. I recommend it to everyone, and this is the cloud version, and it sounds pretty much identical to the, well, I haven't actually had a chance of trying the actual hardware, but I think the software version sounds nearly identical, and it has such beautiful sounding pads. I recommend it to anyone if you were into 90s drum and bass and jungle. So once I have all these elements, it's just a matter of trying to figure out the notes, what kind of notes I'm going to play and what kind of groove and vibe I'm going for. I never have, when I start a track, I usually never have ideas, like maybe just a bit of ideas of what sort of breaks I'm going to use, but then everything else depends on the sounds I choose to use, and it just sort of, I start writing tracks intuitively just whatever vibe I'm getting by playing different, you know, melodies and stuff. Also, in terms of processing, there isn't really much going on. As I said, most of the sounds are pre-processed, so all I have left to do is just the EQing everything, which again, I'm probably using just the built-in EQ, and my breaks, say is the Amen break. I just got a little bit of like low high pass filter, bit of mids, and pretty much that's how everything looks like. Very simple, mostly just dealing with low end. And then there's some things going on. Oh, by the way, in terms of effects, I'm only using effects through Sense, and I'm using a couple of instances of Valhalla Supermassive. This one is very similar sound-wise, very similar to my Alessa's Quadraverb, and I think it sounds wonderful. And on a master bus, I don't usually have anything on my master bus when I'm working with hardware, but since you know, software allows to add a couple of extra things, I don't mind using them. So one of them being Yuhi Satan, I don't know how to actually pronounce it. I usually, if you can hear, there's like a hiss in the background. So I use that for the hiss mostly. Bit of input distortion, although it doesn't do much in distortion. And I use a little, shift a little bit the azimuth to either left or right gently. That creates a bit different stereo field, so it sounds more like it's coming from actual hardware, like a tape or so, you know, that doesn't have very perfect sound. It has a bit of imperfections between left and right side, which kind of adds color anyway, because when I work with hardware, there's always a bit of a, you know, unbalanced going on between left and right. And then the next plugin that I like to use on the master bus is this Tokyo, what's the company called? Whatever, it's a massive compressor by Kotelnikov. It's a free plugin. And by the way, in terms of plugins, I wouldn't encourage you buying lots of different plugins, because that might do something or that might do something. In most of the cases, the biggest part for the track to be interesting is the track itself, like what sort of sounds you're using, the melodies you're playing and stuff. And then the processing part of the track is the secondary for me, and I think it doesn't have to be your main focus. So don't spend money on plugins, because you can usually have like one or two favorite plugins and use it all the time. There's also a lot of free plugins that actually sound quite good, depending what you need. Don't need like, I don't know, super duper something. You know, well, in my case, I don't bother myself with that at all. I mean, you know, you can use that with just native plugins. You can achieve good results using native plugins, or at least knowing the character that the plugins you have are giving to you, because every plugin does have a bit of a character, and digital or software plugins are quite transparent. They don't usually add that much color than you would otherwise get from hardware. But still, I mean, you can do stuff with free plugins or the ones that come within your DAW. I mean, it should be more than fine. Hopefully that explained something to you, that gave you some ideas. And now let's play the track. And don't forget to leave a comment if you like the track. By the way, also, just before I'm gonna show you the whole track, I just wanted to let you know that read the description. I'm gonna share the project file with you, so those who are using Reason 12 hopefully will be able to open with all the data and samples and programs in it. Except if you don't have that certain plugins, you could replace the sounds with your own sounds. Just have fun studying what it is, making your own versions, remixing, whatever. So yeah, enjoy that, and on to the track.